can Ferrari's myth resist the most brutal challenge of the year? With a car that does not respond, a strategy on the edge of the collapse, and a race that demands surgical precision, will the Scuderia survive the labyrinth of Monaco? The emotional context of this Grand Prix further aggravates the situation. Monaco is not any career for Leclerc. It is his home, the place where he grew up seeing the cars to the streets that he was traveling as a child. Winning here has a symbolic value that transcends sports. But this year, the stage is bleak. Ferrari arrives without real weapons to compete for victory. The risk of early elimination in classification or an abandonment by technical error is real and puts into play not only the points, but the mood of an entire team. In Monaco, each camera will be focused on Ferrari's performance, not for what they can win, but for what they can lose. The image of a Scuderia overflowed with pressure, with an erratic car and pilots trapped in a frustration loop, can be devastating for internal morals and external perception of the 2025 project. This change was not simply an adjustment. It was an aggressive commitment that sought to replicate the success of Red Bull and McLaren, teams that have demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach in slow and medium speed curves. But in Ferrari, the adaptation was disastrous. The system geometry has radically altered the dynamic behavior of the car, unbalancing the relationship between the front and rear axle. Leclerc, known for preferring cars with an over-Werder character, has been forced to deal with a pronounced subwiring that prevents him from attacking the curves with the usual confidence. This transformation has eroded its pilot style, leading it to make non-characteristic mistakes and causing its performance to be inconsistent, especially in classification. In addition, the car presents an even more worrying characteristic: its aerodynamic instability. The SF25 shows an alarming loss of load on the rear axle during the changes of direction at high speed. This deficiency not only affects the career rhythm, but also significantly increases the risk of track errors. In a circuit like Monaco, where the walls are centimeters from the layout, any sudden load loss can be terminal. The telemetric data collected in previous careers and in training shows a constant. Pilots must correct more times than their rivals to keep the car online, something that forces them to always lead to the error limit, even in installation laps. As if that were not enough, the SF25 has not shown signals of improvement as the calendar advances. Unlike other teams that have brought evolutionary packages that clearly improve the behavior of the car, Ferrari has failed to develop solutions that mitigate their weaknesses. Aerodynamic updates have not offered measurable results and in some cases have generated new imbalances. This has created a climate of uncertainty within the technical team, where the management of the development and response capacity of the engineering departments begins to question. The lack of correlation between simulation data and track behavior also suggests structural problems in aerodynamic design and validation processes. This situation puts Ferrari at a technical crossroads. The SF25 is not only not competitive, but its structure limits the margin of realistic improvement within an ongoing season. Redesigning key components such as suspension or aerodynamic flow channels requires time and resources that, in a calendar as compressed as that of the current Formula One, are practically impossible to mobilize without negatively affecting the 2026 car program. In this context, the Monaco GP is emerging as a deformed mirror that will show, in a cruel way, the reality of Ferrari. Each narrow curve, each rear train rebound, and each braking imprecision will be a public reminder that this car not only was born with errors, but can end up being the symbol of stagnation of a team that, once again, has confused innovation with improvisation. In Formula One, the classification session is usually important, but in Monaco it becomes the decisive moment of the weekend. This urban layout, with narrow streets, blind curves and minimum error margins, transforms the output grille into a practically definitive sentence. The history of the Monaco GP is full of examples where the pilot who got the pole position ended up raising the trophy, not because of a great career strategy, but because it is simply almost impossible to advance without assuming unacceptable risks. It is in this relentless context that Ferrari's greatest weak point in 2025 becomes his greatest threat: his chronic inability to classify in front positions. The SF25 has demonstrated throughout the season that it is not a competitive car on a return. Its classification times, even in more conventional circuits, have been far behind the leaders. The situation was particularly worrying in Miami, where Charles Leclerc, with a clean turn, could barely place 8th, more than half a second of the best time, being surpassed even by the two Williams. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, was eliminated in Q2, without ever finding the appropriate balance or the grip necessary to squeeze the car at the crucial moment. This pattern has been repeated in other rounds, and the cause is not one, but a combination of technical limitations and strategic decisions that are simply not working. The SF25 configuration fails to find the optimal temperature window for classification tires. While McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull seem to have dominated the art of preparing their quick return with surgical precision, Ferrari continues to oscillate between compounds that do not yield how they should and pilots that must improvise with an unstable balance. To this is added the fact that, in several circuits, the team has been unable to offer a consistent setup for both pilots, causing one of them to be out of the first 10 almost by default. In Monaco, this weakness becomes a conviction. Any position outside the first 3 rows can be considered a resounding failure, because once cars enter the race rhythm, the difference in times between laps is minimal, and overtaking only occur in extreme cases, such as rival errors, incidents, or strategies completely out of the ordinary. What Ferrari needs, then, is a perfect classification without margin for mistakes, without yellow flags that interrupt attempts, without rapid traffic. And that level of execution at this time seems to be out of reach. Even if Charles Leclerc achieves a magical return, something he has done before in this circuit dash, the lack of classification rhythm of the SF25 could neutralize any individual talent. In addition, the increase in traffic due to the new generation of young pilots, many of them still learning to control Monaco pressure, increases the risk of interruptions in Q1 and Q2. A single calculation error, a red flag, or a bad track placement could eliminate any hope of a decent result, especially if the Scuderia fails to place its cars among the first since the first attempt. The pressure is huge. A bad classification would not only complicate the race, but also generate a domino effect on the pneumatic strategy, the pilot's rhythm management, and the morals. And the most serious thing is that Ferrari seems to have lost that instantaneous reaction capacity that distinguishes champions teams. Instead of adjusting on the march, as McLaren or Mercedes do, Maranello engineers seem to need more time than the F1 weekend format can offer. In Monaco, where everything is decided in thousandths of second, that lack of agility can cost more expensive than anywhere else in the calendar. The environment, symbolism, history, and media pressure convert this grand prize into a test not only technical, but also psychological. For Ferrari, this race reaches the worst possible moment, and are precisely its 2 main figures, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, who carry the emotional weight of an entire team that seems to be on the verge of collapse. Charles Leclerc faces an almost theatrical situation in his drama. The Monegasco pilot, raised in the same streets that now runs more than 280 kilometers per hour, lives a complex relationship with his house career. For years, the Monaco Grand Prix was his personal curse. Abandonments, team errors, mechanical failures, and even accidents deprived him of shining before his people. In 2024, he finally broke that curse with a historic victory that seemed the beginning of a new stage, both personal and professional. However, 12 months later, it is in front of a mirror that returns a disfigured image. His car is not up to par, his team crosses a deep internal crisis, and what is worse, the expectation of repeating his feat now becomes an almost paralyzing pressure. Leclerc is not just one more pilot in Ferrari. It is his face, his emotional symbol. Every time he gets into the car, he loads with the legacy of the big names that preceded him and with the responsibility of representing not only his team, but to a whole nation that sees in him the heir of the glamour and the Monegasque glory. But in 2025, all that romanticism has collided in front with the harsh technical reality of SF25. The car does not respond, the trust has eroded, and Leclerc itself begins to show worse signs. His post-carrier statements have become more gloomy, and their frustration is palpable in each gesture within the cockpit. In Monaco, that pressure can be transformed into an unsustainable slab. At the other end of the garage, Lewis Hamilton lives a different dilemma, but equally corrosive. The British arrived in Ferrari as El Salvador. His signing was seen as an act of mutual faith. He trusted that Maranello could return to the top, and the team received him as the architect of his resurrection. But reality has been more cruel than anyone imagined. In his first races, Hamilton has had to adapt to a car that not only does not belong yet, but also does not respond to his technical demands. Each lap is a negotiation exercise with an unpredictable car, and every weekend it is a roller coaster of emotions. Both pilots are in the eye of the hurricane. Leclerc, for what it represents emotionally, Hamilton, so it symbolizes professionally. And among them, a divided Ferrari, trapped between the expectations they generated and the technical impotence of a project that does not finish curdling. In Monaco, each gesture, each word, and each result will be interpreted as a signal. If something goes wrong, the psychological impact could mark the rest of the season, not only in terms of points, but in the cohesion of the team, the morale of the pilots, and the immediate future of the SF25 project. Ferrari's situation in the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix is not just a technical or results issue, it is a reflection of the most fragile moment in years for one of the most iconic teams in the history of Formula One. And the most disturbing thing is that, unlike other years where there was a narrative of hope based on the potential of the car or in a strategic comeback, today what dominates the environment in Maranello is uncertainty. This is the type of scenario that divides hobbies, polarizes analysts, and leaves unanswered questions. Therefore, beyond the detailed analysis we have made of the SF25, of its structural weaknesses, of the internal pressures that Leclerc and Hamilton live, and the impossible context that monastically represents for a technically unstable car, it is time to transfer the conversation to those who really support this sport with their passion and knowledge. You, the community. Because in times of crisis like this, each opinion counts. Each perspective brings a new layer of understanding to a sport as complex as emotionally intense. Then the question is direct. Do you think Ferrari can reverse the situation before the summer break, or we are seeing the collapse of a project that promised a lot and delivers very little? Is there room to save the season with a blow of effect or a technical improvement in the next rounds, or are we facing another reconstruction from scratch? And what impact do you think this can have in the immediate future of Hamilton and Ferrari and in Leclerc's emotional stability, especially if Monaco turns out to be another devastating blow in his already complicated history with this circuit? Leave your analysis in the comments. We want to read your vision, your hypothesis, and your predictions. This channel is a space for technical reflection, but also for the honest debate between fans who understand that Formula One is much more than cars spinning in circles. It is political, it is drama, it is high-level engineering, and above all, it is a story that is rewritten every weekend with the collaboration of all who love this sport. And if you like this type of analysis, consider subscribing.